Today, the ground beneath you seems solid, stable. The mountains, the valleys, the forests, they all appear unchanged, untouched by time. But there was a time when the Earth was anything but stable. A time when the planet was engulfed in fire, where volcanoes erupted relentlessly and the sky was choked with ash. Imagine a world where lava flowed for millions of years, where the oceans boiled and the air was thick with sulfur, not in a far-off galaxy, not in a dream, but right here on Earth. The landscape was scorched, the climate turned upside down, and life was pushed to the brink of extinction. Plants, animals, even entire ecosystems vanished or were forced to adapt in unimaginable ways. And here's the part that should make you think. The scars of that fiery age are still here, in the rocks beneath our feet, the deep oceans, and even in the very air we breathe. The Earth was transformed by a volcanic fury that lasted for 1 million years, and we're only beginning to understand how it changed everything. Volcanoes didn't just reshape the Earth, they rewrote the rules of life itself. What if we are on the brink of another volcanic eruption that could alter our world in ways we can't predict? Stick around, because what you're about to hear will change how you see the planet, its past, and its future forever. Imagine standing on the edge of a massive cliff, watching as molten rock pours from the earth, swallowing everything in its path. The ground shakes beneath you, the sky darkens with thick clouds of ash, and the air burns with heat. Now, imagine that this isn't a rare event, but something happening over and over again for thousands of years. This is what happened during one of the most destructive volcanic periods in Earth's history. It was a time when the planet itself seemed to be fighting back, reshaping landscapes, and changing the course of life forever. About 75,000 years ago, something incredible happened. A supervolcano erupted with such force that it nearly destroyed the planet's ecosystem. You might have heard of the eruption of Mount Toba, one of the largest volcanic events ever recorded. The explosion was so massive that it is thought to have created a volcanic winter, cooling the Earth by several degrees and leading to a dramatic collapse of many species, including early humans. But the eruption of Mount Toba was just one chapter in a long history of supervolcanic eruptions, and these volcanoes had a massive impact on life for millions of years. Supervolcanoes are different from regular volcanoes. They don't just erupt for a few weeks or months, throwing ash into the sky and creating a little chaos. No, a supervolcano is a beast that erupts on a scale that defies imagination. It can cause eruptions that last for years or even decades, spewing ash and lava that can change the climate, wipe out species, and create entire new landscapes. These massive eruptions don't just impact the local area, they can affect the entire globe, disrupting weather patterns, lowering temperatures, and creating what scientists call a volcanic winter. During these events, the sky can become so thick with ash that sunlight is blocked, leading to extreme cooling. The eruption of Mount Toba in what is now Indonesia was one of the most significant of these supervolcanic events. This eruption, which occurred around 75,000 years ago, is believed to have been over 1,000 times more powerful than the eruption of Mount St. Helens in 1980. The force of the eruption released more than 2,000 cubic kilometers of volcanic material into the atmosphere, enough to fill the Grand Canyon more than 500 times over. The effects on the Earth were catastrophic. Global temperatures dropped by as much as 5 degrees Celsius, and the volcanic ash covered vast areas of land, turning lush forests into barren wastelands. This catastrophic event didn't just change the landscape, it also changed the course of human history. Early humans, who were already struggling to survive, found themselves facing a hostile world. The volcanic winter that followed the eruption likely led to a bottleneck in human populations, with only a small group of survivors making it through the disaster. This was a near-extinction event for humanity, and it's likely that the small population that survived laid the foundation for all modern humans. But while Mount Toba is one of the most famous supervolcanoes, it wasn't the only one. Supervolcanoes have erupted throughout Earth's history, and their eruptions have had a huge impact on the planet's ecosystems. These eruptions have shaped the evolution of life, including humans, in ways we are still trying to understand. They remind us that our planet is constantly changing, and sometimes the Earth's power can be so overwhelming that life itself is put on the brink. In this chapter, we've only just begun to scratch the surface of the massive forces at play when supervolcanoes erupt. But understanding these events is crucial because they help explain how life on Earth can be reshaped in an instant. It's a reminder that while humanity may feel like we are in control, the Earth has the final say. When most people think of a volcano, they imagine a mountain with a hole at the top where lava and ash shoot out. It's a dramatic event that can cause destruction and chaos, but it's usually short-lived. Now, imagine a volcano so powerful that it doesn't just erupt once or twice, but for years or even decades. A volcano that, when it erupts, can change the entire climate of the Earth. This is what a supervolcano does. These massive eruptions are unlike anything a regular volcano could create. Supervolcanoes are not just big, they're planet, shaping events that leave a lasting mark on the Earth's surface and its atmosphere. A supervolcano is defined by the size and scale of its eruption. For a volcano to be considered a supervolcano, it has to release at least 1,000 cubic kilometers of material during an eruption. To put that into perspective, that's enough to fill the Grand Canyon more than 500 times over. This is far beyond the scope of regular volcanic eruptions, which tend to release much less material. A typical volcanic eruption might release only a few cubic kilometers of ash and lava, while a supervolcano eruption is on a completely different level. It's like comparing a firecracker to a nuclear bomb. The power and scale are just that much bigger. One of the key features of a supervolcano is the caldera it leaves behind. A caldera is a giant crater formed when the ground collapses after a massive eruption. The eruption empties the magma chamber beneath the volcano, and when the pressure is released, the land above it sinks, creating a huge hole. The size of these calderas can be staggering, often stretching for dozens of miles across. The Yellowstone caldera in the United States, for example, spans about 30 miles. When a supervolcano erupts, the caldera is formed, and what remains can look like an enormous, barren wasteland. What really sets supervolcanoes apart from regular volcanoes is how their eruptions affect the climate. When they erupt, they release not only ash, but also gases like sulfur dioxide and carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. These gases can block sunlight, causing the Earth's temperature to drop, sometimes by several degrees. This is known as a volcanic winter, and it can last for years or even decades. The ash cloud can be so thick that it covers the globe, making it hard for plants to grow, disrupting food chains, and creating a harsh environment for all life forms. Regular volcanic eruptions, on the other hand, are usually localized events that affect the immediate area around the volcano. While they can still be devastating, they don't have the global impact that supervolcano eruptions do. Regular volcanoes also tend to erupt in cycles, with shorter periods of activity followed by long periods of dormancy. Supervolcanoes, however, can erupt in an almost continuous cycle, with smaller eruptions over time that build up to an explosive event. This long-term activity can go on for tens of thousands of years, slowly shaping the planet in ways that we are only beginning to understand. Supervolcanoes aren't just a thing of the past, though. There are still supervolcanoes around the world today, including in places like Yellowstone and Toba. While the chances of a supervolcano erupting in the near future are low, the threat is real. The power of these eruptions is something we can't fully predict or prepare for, and that's what makes them so dangerous. They remind us that the Earth is a living, breathing planet, constantly changing and capable of unpredictable events that can alter the course of life itself. Imagine a world where volcanoes never stop erupting. Day after day, year after year, eruptions fill the sky with ash, covering the land in a thick veil of smoke and debris. This isn't a one-time event or something that happens every few decades, but a constant, unrelenting force of nature that goes on for millions of years. A world shaped not by brief explosions, but by long, continuous volcanic activity. This is what happened during some of Earth's most intense volcanic periods, where eruptions didn't just happen in isolation, but were part of an ongoing process that transformed entire ecosystems over 1 million years. Volcanic eruptions can be part of a long chain of events that reshape the landscape and climate. This wasn't just about one volcano going off and causing destruction for a few days or weeks. Instead, it's about volcanoes erupting repeatedly over a vast stretch of time, each eruption building on the last, creating a cycle of destruction and renewal. The material that's ejected during these eruptions, ash, lava, gases, doesn't just disappear, it accumulates, covering vast areas of land, blocking out the sun, and altering the very climate of the planet. For millions of years, eruptions can change everything. Forests and jungles can turn into barren wastelands. Animals that once thrived in lush environments might find their homes buried under layers of ash. The land itself can crack open, creating fissures that reshape rivers and mountain ranges. And as the eruptions continue, the ecosystems that once flourished are forced to adapt to a new reality. This isn't a quick disaster that's over in a few years. It's a slow, grinding process that forces life on Earth to constantly adjust and evolve. The eruptions that happened during these long volcanic periods didn't always look the same. Some were massive, spewing ash and lava over hundreds of miles, while others were smaller, less explosive, but still powerful enough to have a lasting impact. Over time, these eruptions formed huge lava plateaus, massive calderas, and volcanoes that dotted the landscape, changing the way the Earth's surface looked. But it wasn't just the physical landscape that was affected. The climate also took a huge hit. With each eruption, massive amounts of gases, like sulfur dioxide, were released into the atmosphere. These gases would combine with water vapor to create sulfuric acid, which rained down on the Earth, cooling the planet and triggering what we call a volcanic winter. During these cold periods, temperatures could drop by several degrees, making it difficult for many species to survive. Plants that relied on sunlight would struggle to grow, and the animals that depended on them would be forced to find new food sources or face extinction. This wasn't just a short-lived problem, though. As the eruptions continued, the Earth's climate remained in a constant state of flux. Some periods were colder, while others warmed up slightly. But the volcanic activity created an unpredictable environment where life had to adapt constantly. Species that could adapt to the changing conditions survived, while others, unable to cope with the harsh new world, faded away. Over the course of 1 million years, this cycle of eruption, destruction, and adaptation played out again and again. The Earth's ecosystems were constantly shifting, with new species evolving to take advantage of the changing environment, while others disappeared forever. And all of this was driven by the ongoing volcanic activity, which, over time, reshaped the world we live in today. The Earth was alive with fire, constantly changing and forcing life to evolve in ways that still echo throughout the planet's history. It's hard to imagine a time when the Earth itself seemed to be on fire. But about 250 million years ago, during a period known as the Age of Fire, the planet was alive with volcanic eruptions that reshaped everything. Volcanoes erupted not just once in a while, but on a constant, almost unrelenting basis. Lava flowed across vast landscapes, turning lush forests into rivers of molten rock. Pyroclastic flows, fast-moving clouds of gas, ash, and volcanic debris, rushed down the sides of mountains with terrifying speed, burying everything in their path. This was a time when fire ruled the planet, and the world as we know it was beginning to take shape. The Age of Fire began as the Earth's tectonic plates shifted, creating conditions that allowed supervolcanoes to form and erupt. These eruptions were on a scale far beyond anything we see today. Lava poured from cracks in the Earth's surface, covering large areas with thick layers of molten rock. The heat was intense, and the fire of the Earth burned hotter and brighter than anything seen in modern times. Whole regions were transformed into volcanic landscapes, where the ground cracked open and spilled out rivers of lava that carved new paths across the Earth. But it wasn't just the lava that changed the planet. The eruptions also sent massive clouds of ash into the atmosphere, which blocked out the sun and changed the climate. These volcanic winters weren't like the brief cold spells we sometimes experience today. The ash lingered in the sky for years, sometimes even decades, causing temperatures to drop by several degrees. This cooling effect disrupted ecosystems, making it harder for plants and animals to survive. Despite the challenges, life on Earth found ways to adapt. Species that could survive in the harsh conditions of volcanic winters managed to make it through the eruptions. Plants evolved to grow in the nutrient-rich soils created by volcanic ash, and new species of animals found ways to live in the changing environment. But this wasn't an easy process. Life had to constantly adjust to the ever-changing volcanic activity. One eruption might bring months of darkness and freezing temperatures, while the next could bring a brief period of warmth before the next wave of eruptions began. During the Age of Fire, the Earth was constantly in flux. Lava flows and pyroclastic flows reshaped the land, creating new mountain ranges and valleys, while the ongoing volcanic activity forced life to evolve in new and often unexpected ways. The planet was alive with fire, and the ecosystems were in a constant state of change. It wasn't a gentle transformation. It was a violent reshaping of the planet, driven by the raw power of Earth's volcanic forces. In many ways, the Age of Fire was a crucible, testing life on Earth and pushing species to evolve quickly or face extinction. The volcanic activity created both destruction and opportunity, forcing life to adapt in order to survive. Today, we can still see the marks of that age. Many of the landscapes we see, from the Hawaiian Islands to the volcanic mountains of the Pacific Ring of Fire, are direct descendants of that time when the Earth was being shaped by the heat and fury of volcanoes. The Age of Fire may have ended long ago, but the fire still burns beneath our feet, reminding us of the power the planet holds. Picture this. A volcano erupts, sending a massive plume of ash high into the sky. At first, it seems like a normal eruption, but then something unexpected happens. The ash doesn't just float away. Instead, it spreads across the globe, drifting in the atmosphere, slowly darkening the skies and cooling the planet. This wasn't just an isolated disaster for the area around the volcano. The first ash fall from supervolcanic eruptions had effects that were felt across the entire world. The consequences were so severe that they disrupted life on Earth in ways that no one could have predicted. The immediate effects of volcanic ash were dramatic. As the ash cloud spread, it blocked out sunlight, casting a shadow over entire continents. The Earth's surface became dim and cold, with the skies turning a deep grey. What would normally be a bright, sunlit day turned into an eerie twilight, where sunlight could barely make its way through the thick cloud of ash. Without sunlight, plants struggled to grow. The cool temperatures caused by the ash lowered global temperatures, sending the Earth into a volcanic winter. This cooling effect wasn't just temporary. It lasted for years, sometimes even decades, and changed the climate in ways that would last for much longer. The drop in temperature had immediate and far-reaching effects on ecosystems. Plants, which depend on sunlight for photosynthesis, were unable to produce food, leading to widespread crop failure. Animals that relied on these plants for food faced starvation. The disruption of the food chain caused by the volcanic ashfall had a ripple effect on all levels of life. Herbivores couldn't find enough food to survive, and without them, predators struggled to find prey. It was a devastating chain reaction. Species that relied on specific climates and ecosystems had to either adapt or die, and many couldn't keep up with the rapid changes. The ash itself was not just a climate changer, but also a direct threat to life. It settled on everything, on trees, on the ground, in rivers, and even in the air. In many places, the ash was so thick that it smothered plant life and polluted water sources. The fine particles of volcanic ash were toxic when inhaled, causing respiratory problems for both animals and humans. In some areas, the ash was so thick that it was impossible to see, making it difficult for animals to find food or for humans to navigate. What made this first ash fall even more dangerous was its persistence. Unlike a typical volcanic eruption, where ash falls might last for a few hours or days, the ash from supervolcanoes could remain in the atmosphere for years. It didn't just fall and settle quickly. The particles remained suspended, drifting across continents, gradually cooling the Earth and causing massive disruptions to the weather. Regions that were once warm and fertile became cold and dry, and the Earth's ecosystems struggled to adjust. The first ash fall marked the beginning of a long period of climate instability. It was a reminder that volcanic eruptions weren't just local events. They could change the entire planet's climate. The Earth was forced into a new, unpredictable climate pattern, and the struggle for survival became even harder. For millions of years, Earth would endure these periodic eruptions and their global effects, with life constantly adjusting to the harsh, changing environment. The first ash fall set the stage for an era of destruction, resilience, and adaptation. It was the beginning of a new chapter in the Earth's history, one that would challenge life to adapt and evolve in the face of overwhelming odds. When a supervolcano erupts, it's not just a local event. The eruption sends more than just ash into the air. It releases massive amounts of gases, including sulfur dioxide, which can have a global impact on the Earth's climate. The sulfur dioxide rises high into the atmosphere, where it combines with water vapor to form tiny droplets of sulfuric acid. These droplets float in the atmosphere, reflecting sunlight back into space and preventing it from reaching the surface of the Earth. This is the key to what scientists call a volcanic winter. Instead of the usual warming effect from the sun, the Earth experiences a cooling effect that can last for years or even decades. Imagine waking up one morning to a world that's suddenly colder than usual. The temperature drops, the air feels chillier, and you notice that it's hard to see the sun. This is what would happen during a volcanic winter. It starts with the eruption of a supervolcano, which spews out enormous clouds of ash and gases. These clouds are so thick that they block out sunlight, causing the Earth's temperature to fall. It's like the planet is wrapped in a blanket of ash and gas, cutting off the warmth of the sun. Without sunlight, the Earth cools rapidly, and the effects are felt around the world. The cooling isn't just a small drop in temperature either. Scientists believe that volcanic winters can cause global temperatures to drop by several degrees, which doesn't sound like much, but it has a huge impact on life. When temperatures drop, ecosystems that were once thriving begin to struggle. Plants, which rely on sunlight to grow, find it harder to photosynthesize. Crops fail, forests become barren, and food becomes harder to find. For animals that depend on plants for food, this cooling period is catastrophic. Without enough food to survive, they either adapt or face extinction. It's not just the plants and animals that are affected. Human civilizations that existed during volcanic winters faced incredible hardships as well. Early humans were already struggling to survive in harsh environments, and a sudden cooling event only made things worse. The cold temperatures meant that food became scarce, and people had to fight to find enough resources to survive. With shorter growing seasons and less sunlight, agriculture became nearly impossible, and hunting became harder as animals also faced their own struggles. The world had become a much harsher place to live. The most troubling part of volcanic winters is how long they can last. A single eruption can trigger years of cooling, and the effects can last for decades. It's not just a few cold seasons. It's a prolonged period of global temperature shifts that can change the climate of the entire planet. During the most extreme volcanic winters, scientists believe that ice sheets expanded, sea levels dropped, and the planet's ecosystems had to adjust to this new cold reality. But even though volcanic winters are incredibly destructive, they are part of the Earth's natural cycle. Volcanic activity has been shaping the planet for millions of years, and volcanic winters are just one example of how the Earth can change in response to these events. Life on Earth is resilient, and even though volcanic winters cause massive disruption, species have always found ways to adapt and survive. The Earth may cool down, but life will always find a way to keep going. The volcanic winter isn't just a story of destruction. It's also a story of how life can bounce back, even after being pushed to the brink of extinction. Imagine a world where entire ecosystems collapse in a matter of days. Plants wither and die, animal populations plummet, and the food chain unravels. This is what happened during the most catastrophic volcanic events in Earth's history. When supervolcanoes erupted, they didn't just change the landscape, they triggered a cascade of extinctions that rippled through the planet, causing widespread devastation. The immediate effects of volcanic eruptions were deadly, but the long-term consequences were even more severe. Volcanic activity has the power to destroy entire habitats in a short period of time. When a supervolcano erupts, it releases a massive amount of ash and gases into the atmosphere. These clouds block out sunlight, cooling the Earth and causing what we call a volcanic winter. With the loss of sunlight, plant life struggles to survive. Without plants, herbivores have nothing to eat, and without herbivores, carnivores lose their food sources. What once was a thriving ecosystem quickly becomes a barren wasteland. Entire forests are smothered by layers of volcanic ash, rivers run dry, and the once abundant life that called these places home is wiped out. This destruction isn't limited to just one small area. The effects of a supervolcano's eruption are global, and the resulting environmental changes cause a chain reaction. When volcanic ash blankets the planet, temperatures drop, weather patterns change, and ecosystems around the world begin to collapse. Species that were already vulnerable to climate changes or environmental stresses find themselves unable to survive in the harsh new conditions. Plants die off because they can't get enough sunlight, animals starve because they have no food to eat, and entire populations disappear. The cascade of extinctions doesn't happen overnight. The cooling effect caused by volcanic eruptions may take years to unfold, but the longer it lasts, the more devastating it becomes. As ecosystems break down, species that rely on specific climates and habitats are driven to extinction. The loss of biodiversity during volcanic winters is staggering. Entire groups of animals that once thrived are suddenly gone. For example, large herbivores that depended on rich vegetation face food shortages, and without them, the predators that hunted them follow suit. In addition to the direct effects of the volcanic eruptions, the destruction of ecosystems leads to a disruption in the global food chain. When one link in the food chain disappears, the rest follows. For example, when herbivores die off, carnivores that rely on them for food have to adapt or perish. This disruption creates a ripple effect that spreads through the entire food web. What was once a delicate balance of life is now thrown into chaos. But even though the immediate aftermath of these volcanic events is catastrophic, the Earth eventually begins to heal. While many species never recover, others adapt to the new, harsher world. Over time, life finds a way to return, but the volcanic activity has left its mark, and the planet will never be the same. Species that survive the eruptions pass down their resilient traits to future generations. New species rise to fill the gaps left by the extinctions, creating a new balance in the ecosystem. The Earth, although scarred by the destruction, moves forward, always changing, always adapting. It's a harsh reminder that extinction isn't just a single event. It's a process that unfolds over time, driven by forces as powerful as volcanic eruptions. In the aftermath of a supervolcanic eruption, the world is a harsh and unforgiving place. With ecosystems destroyed, temperatures plummeting, and food sources scarce, it would seem like nothing could survive. Yet, in the face of overwhelming odds, some species managed to hang on. They found ways to adapt to the new world, carving out niches in a world that had been drastically reshaped by volcanic activity. These survivors are not just a testament to the power of adaptation, but to the resilience of life itself. One of the most remarkable survivors during these catastrophic events was early humans. While many species were wiped out, humans found a way to endure. It wasn't easy. The volcanic winters that followed the eruptions plunged the Earth into a cold, dark period. Crops failed, and the animals humans relied on for food became scarce. Yet, humans were able to adapt in ways that many other species couldn't. The key to human survival lay in their ability to cooperate, innovate, and adapt quickly to changing conditions. Some early human groups likely took refuge in areas that were less affected by the volcanic fallout. These refuges might have been regions with natural resources like water, shelter, and food, where they could continue to survive. The caves in Europe or sheltered valleys in Africa might have offered some protection from the harsh conditions outside. In these refuges, humans could find ways to adapt to their environment, relying on their resourcefulness to find new food sources and develop new tools to help them survive. But it wasn't just humans who managed to survive. Many species found refuge in specific ecological niches. While large herbivores and predators struggled with the loss of vegetation and prey, smaller, more adaptable animals found ways to survive. Creatures that could burrow into the ground or hide in caves found shelter from the ash and the cold. Insects, for example, are extremely adaptable and can survive in a wide range of conditions. Many small mammals, amphibians, and reptiles also found ways to survive by adapting to the changing environment. They might have turned to eating different foods or living in different habitats where they were less affected by the volcanic winter. In the aftermath of the volcanic events, some species even thrived in the new environment. The volcanic ash, while destructive in the short term, also enriched the soil with nutrients that would eventually help new plant species grow. Over time, new vegetation took root, and the animals that survived adapted to this changed landscape. The survivors had found a way to live in a world that had been thrown into chaos, finding refuge in the niches that remained after the storm. The survival of these species, including early humans, was no accident. It was the result of millions of years of evolution that had prepared them to cope with extreme conditions. Early humans, for example, had developed social structures that helped them work together in times of crisis. They had learned to use tools, make fire, and develop strategies to overcome challenges. These traits would have been crucial during the volcanic winters. Ultimately, the survivors from this period would go on to shape the future of life on Earth. They became the ancestors of the species we see today, carrying with them the lessons learned from their survival. The ability to adapt, to cooperate, and to innovate in the face of disaster became the foundation for the survival of countless species, including our own. When supervolcanoes erupted, they didn't just change the landscape, they fundamentally altered the lives of early humans. These eruptions triggered a volcanic winter that lasted for years, cooling the Earth and disrupting ecosystems. The harsh conditions created by the volcanic activity forced early humans to adapt quickly or risk extinction. It was a time of great struggle, but it was also a time that shaped humanity in ways we still feel today. Early humans, who were already living in challenging environments, now faced even harsher conditions. With temperatures dropping, food sources dwindling, and the sun blocked out by volcanic ash, survival became a daily battle. Many species of animals and plants struggled to survive the cooling period, but humans, with their ability to adapt, began to find ways to cope with these challenges. One of the key changes in human behavior during this period was migration. As the volcanic winter set in, regions that were once lush and fertile became barren and inhospitable. The areas that early humans had once called home could no longer support them. Faced with dwindling resources and harsher climates, human groups began to migrate in search of more hospitable environments. These migrations weren't quick or easy. Humans had to move carefully, seeking out pockets of land that were less affected by the volcanic fallout. Some groups likely found refuge in sheltered valleys, caves, or areas with reliable water sources. The ability to move and find new territories was crucial for survival. It was a time of constant change and adaptation, as humans had to learn to read the environment and find ways to live in new places. Along with migration, early humans also had to adapt their social structures. During the volcanic winter, survival depended on cooperation. Those who could work together had a much better chance of making it through. Social bonds became even more important, as groups relied on each other for food, shelter, and protection. Hunting and gathering, once individual tasks, now became group efforts. Sharing knowledge about food sources, water locations, and how to make tools and fire would have been crucial for survival. Over time, these survival strategies strengthened human cooperation, creating the foundations for the social structures that would define human societies for millennia to come. The volcanic winter also led to changes in the way humans interacted with the environment. With food sources scarce, early humans likely had to become more resourceful. They might have turned to new food sources, like insects, roots, and other plants, that were more resistant to the volcanic fallout. The use of fire, which had been a survival tool for early humans, became even more important. Fire provided warmth in the cold climate, helped cook food, and served as protection from predators. The ability to control fire became a key part of human survival during this period. As early humans adapted to these extreme conditions, their survival strategies evolved. The skills they developed during this volcanic crisis, cooperation, resourcefulness, and adaptability, became essential traits for their future survival. These traits, honed during one of the most challenging times in human history, would go on to shape the development of human civilization. The volcanic winter may have tested early humans to their limits, but it also helped forge the resilience that allowed humanity to thrive in the face of adversity. When we think of volcanic eruptions, the first thing that comes to mind is usually destruction. Lava flows, ash clouds, and crumbling landscapes paint a picture of chaos and devastation. Yet, surprisingly, volcanic ash and lava flows also had benefits, especially for early humans who lived through some of Earth's most catastrophic volcanic events. While these eruptions reshaped the planet and disrupted ecosystems, they also provided humans with unique resources that helped them survive and thrive in a harsh environment. One of the most significant ways early humans used volcanic ash was for tools. Volcanic rock, especially obsidian, is a type of glass created when lava cools rapidly. This natural glass is incredibly sharp, and early humans quickly learned how to use it to their advantage. They would pick up pieces of obsidian from the ground, break them into sharp edges, and use them as cutting tools or weapons. These tools were essential for hunting, but they were also useful for gathering food and processing materials. Obsidian knives, for example, could be used to butcher animals with precision and sharp. Edged stones made it easier to cut through plant fibers or skins. In a world where survival depended on having the right tools, volcanic ash provided early humans with an invaluable resource. Beyond tools, volcanic ash played a role in providing shelter. After the eruption of a supervolcano, entire landscapes were covered in ash and lava flows. These thick deposits transformed the land, creating new surfaces for humans to build on. The layers of ash that settled on the ground were often rich in nutrients, which made the soil more fertile. This made volcanic areas excellent for growing crops once the environment began to stabilize. The fertile ash, enriched soils, allowed early humans to cultivate plants, which became a key food source. In fact, in later stages, early agricultural practices were greatly influenced by the ash that had once been a destructive force. The nutrient-rich ash, combined with volcanic lava flows, provided the perfect foundation for farming. Volcanic ash also provided humans with a unique form of protection. After eruptions, ash clouds could settle over large areas, forming a blanket of ash that would insulate the ground. While this could have devastating effects on the environment, it also created temporary shelters for early humans. These ash deposits could offer protection from the sun, extreme temperatures, and even predators. People who found shelter beneath thick layers of volcanic ash were able to survive the brutal volcanic winters that followed eruptions. The natural insulation helped trap heat during cold spells, making the environment a bit more bearable for those living through the volcanic aftermath. As the Earth began to recover, the benefits of volcanic resources continued to be felt. Over time, humans became better at utilizing volcanic materials for practical purposes. The volcanic rocks, ash, and lava that had once seemed like only destructive forces became key resources for survival. What seemed like a curse was, in fact, a blessing in disguise. Early humans learned to adapt to the changes caused by volcanic eruptions, using the very materials that had reshaped their world to help them thrive. Through innovation and resilience, humans turned volcanic ash from a symbol of destruction into a tool for survival. It was proof that, even in the most challenging times, life finds a way to adapt and make use of what is available. Imagine a world where everything is constantly changing. 1 minute, lush forests and green plains stretch across the landscape. The next, volcanic eruptions wipe out these familiar environments, leaving behind vast fields of ash and molten rock. This was the reality that early humans and other species faced during some of Earth's most intense volcanic periods. As volcanoes erupted and reshaped the land, ecosystems had to adjust, often in dramatic ways. The Earth was in a state of constant flux, and only the most adaptable species could survive. After a supervolcano eruption, the landscape could look completely different. Where forests once stood, there were now blackened plains covered in thick layers of volcanic ash. Rivers and lakes were often altered or destroyed by the eruptions. The air was thick with ash, and the sunlight barely reached the surface, cooling the planet and triggering what is known as a volcanic winter. In this new world, ecosystems that had once been stable were now in disarray. Plants that relied on sunlight for photosynthesis found it difficult, if not impossible, to survive. Herbivores that fed on these plants had to find new food sources or face starvation. The delicate balance of life was disrupted, and the survivors had to adapt to a world that was rapidly changing. For the animals and plants that did manage to survive the eruptions, the post-volcanic world offered both challenges and opportunities. With the destruction of old habitats came the creation of new ones. The volcanic landscapes, once barren and lifeless, began to evolve into new ecosystems. The ash that covered the land, while deadly at first, also made the soil richer and more fertile over time. In these new volcanic areas, certain plants could thrive. Over time, the landscape began to change again, slowly giving rise to new forms of life that could take advantage of the fertile soil and altered climate. The eruption that had once destroyed everything now provided a blank canvas for nature to rebuild. This constant change created a world in flux, where life was always adjusting to a shifting environment. Species that could not adapt to the new volcanic landscapes and cooling temperatures disappeared, while others found ways to make the most of the changing conditions. Early humans, for example, found themselves living in a constantly changing world. They had to adapt their tools, their survival strategies, and even their social structures in response to the volcanic fallout. In some places, humans took refuge in caves or valleys that had been less affected by the eruptions. In other areas, they had to learn how to find new food sources, use volcanic materials for tools, and cope with the new, harsher environment. The volcanic landscapes were a new frontier for adaptation. Some species thrived in the harsh conditions, while others struggled to survive. Animals that could burrow underground or adapt to a diet of roots and insects found refuge in the changing world. Birds, mammals, and reptiles that had once lived in forested areas were now forced to find new habitats in the ash-covered plains. Meanwhile, early humans, with their intelligence and adaptability, found ways to use the volcanic landscape to their advantage. They made tools from volcanic rock, learned to use fire, and began to develop new ways of gathering food. Over time, the volcanic landscapes became home to new forms of life. The earth, once covered in destruction, began to heal. The constant flux of ecosystems in the wake of volcanic eruptions didn't just lead to a loss of life. It also led to the creation of new ecosystems, new species, and new opportunities for survival. The world in flux was not just one of destruction, it was one of renewal, adaptation, and survival. Through constant change, life found a way to evolve, proving that even in the most chaotic and unstable environments, nature will always find a way to adapt. When supervolcanoes erupted, they didn't just change the landscape, they changed the course of human history. The eruptions that followed created an environment so harsh that early humans had no choice but to move. Volcanic ash, lava flows, and a drastic cooling of the climate made it difficult to survive in the regions where humans had lived for thousands of years. Food became scarce, habitats were destroyed, and the world was plunged into a volcanic winter. For early humans, the only option was to migrate. This great migration wasn't just about survival, it was about discovering new lands, learning new skills, and adapting to a changing world. The volcanic eruptions that took place during this time didn't just affect a small area, they were global events. Ash and gases spewed into the atmosphere, blocking out the sun and causing temperatures to drop across the planet. The environments that early humans had once called home became uninhabitable. What were once fertile valleys and plains, filled with forests and rivers, were now buried under ash or scorched by lava. The animals that early humans hunted and relied on for food began to disappear, and the plants they gathered for sustenance became harder to find. As a result, early humans were forced to leave these regions in search of more hospitable places to live. This migration was not a quick, one-time event. Early humans didn't just pack up and leave. They had to carefully move from one place to another, looking for areas that had been less affected by the volcanic eruptions. They would have followed rivers, traveled through mountains, and moved along coastlines to find new places to settle. This journey would have taken years, and it wasn't without risk. Early humans faced new dangers, from unpredictable weather to unfamiliar animals and other human groups. Yet, as they migrated, they also discovered new lands, many of which were far richer in resources than the areas they had left behind. Along the way, early humans learned new survival strategies. As they moved into new regions, they encountered different climates and landscapes, and they had to adapt their tools and skills to survive. They learned to use different types of plants for food, discovered new hunting techniques, and found ways to make the most of the resources around them. They also began to develop more sophisticated social structures. In order to survive, early humans had to work together, sharing knowledge about where to find food, how to hunt, and how to protect each other. This sense of cooperation would become crucial for the future of human societies. The Great Migration didn't just lead to new discoveries, it also sparked technological innovations. As early humans encountered new environments, they were forced to come up with new tools to meet their needs. Volcanic regions, with their abundance of volcanic rock, provided early humans with the raw materials needed to make sharper tools and weapons. These advancements in technology helped early humans to not only survive, but to thrive in new areas. The migrations pushed humans to become more inventive, using their creativity to adapt to the challenges of the changing world. As early humans spread across the planet, they encountered new species, new landscapes, and new challenges. This migration, driven by volcanic activity, marked a turning point in human history. It wasn't just about escaping danger. It was about seizing the opportunity to explore new territories, to adapt, and to grow. The Great Migration not only helped early humans survive the volcanic winters, but it also paved the way for the rise of civilizations, the development of culture, and the spread of human innovation across the globe. It was a journey of survival, discovery, and transformation. After supervolcanoes erupted, some areas of Earth became nothing more than poisonous wastelands. The constant volcanic activity not only destroyed habitats, but also created dead zones where no life could survive. These toxic landscapes were a direct result of the volcanic ash, lava flows, and gases that filled the air. For early humans and animals, these areas were places to avoid, as they held no resources and offered no shelter. Instead, they were dangerous, harsh environments where the very land seemed to fight against life. The ash that fell from the sky during volcanic eruptions didn't just cover the ground, it had a lasting impact on the soil. Volcanic ash, when it settles on the earth, can be toxic. It contains chemicals like sulfur and heavy metals, which poison the land. While some plants can eventually adapt to volcanic soil, the immediate aftermath of an eruption left large areas of land completely barren. The ash smothered everything it touched, burying vegetation, rivers, and animal populations beneath thick layers of debris. It was a brutal transformation. Where forests had once stood, there was now nothing but ash, and in places where fertile soil had existed, there was now only a lifeless, rocky surface. This toxic environment was not just dangerous to plants. Animals that depended on the land for food and shelter found themselves in a desperate situation. Herbivores that ate plants could no longer find anything to graze on, and carnivores that relied on those herbivores faced the same problem. Entire ecosystems were wiped out. Rivers and lakes were contaminated with ash and gases, making water undrinkable for both animals and humans. Even the air was thick with sulfur dioxide and carbon monoxide, which poisoned anything that breathed it in. These toxic landscapes became places of death where life could not thrive. For early humans, these toxic zones were an extreme challenge. As the volcanic activity continued, humans were forced to move farther and farther from the areas where life had been possible. While some human groups managed to survive in areas less affected by the ashfall, they still had to contend with the constant threat of toxic landscapes. They had to find new sources of water and food, often traveling long distances to avoid the dead zones. Any area close to volcanic activity was a dangerous place, where the very air could suffocate you, and the ground was too poisoned to grow anything. Yet, even in these seemingly impossible environments, life found a way to survive. Some animals adapted to the harsh conditions, learning to live in areas far from the eruptions or finding refuge in more sheltered locations. Early humans, too, adapted. They learned to identify the areas where they could find food and water, avoiding the toxic zones and relying on their ability to migrate. Over time, humans became experts in navigating the changing landscape, learning how to survive in a world where entire ecosystems could be destroyed in the blink of an eye. Toxic landscapes were a constant reminder of the power of volcanic activity and the vulnerability of life. They showed that even the most beautiful, fertile lands could be transformed into poisonous wastelands. For early humans and animals alike, survival in these toxic areas was a matter of constant adaptation, and it was a struggle that would continue for generations. The Earth had become a place of extremes, where life could be obliterated in moments, but where, through persistence and innovation, life could also find a way to endure. It's hard to imagine how life could thrive in the aftermath of a supervolcanic eruption. With the planet covered in ash, temperatures plummeting, and ecosystems in ruins, it seemed like survival would be nearly impossible. Yet, in the middle of this chaos, something remarkable happened. The extreme pressure of constant volcanic eruptions may have actually driven some species, including humans, to evolve faster. The harsh environment forced life to adapt quickly, and those who were able to evolve in response to the changing conditions were the ones who survived. This period of volcanic turmoil didn't just challenge life, it pushed it to new evolutionary heights. For early humans, the volcanic period was a time of unprecedented challenges. With food sources scarce and the environment constantly changing, humans had to rely on their ability to adapt quickly to survive. Those who could think on their feet, find new food sources, and work together in increasingly harsh conditions had a better chance of survival. It was during this period that the very traits that would later define humanity, intelligence, social cooperation, and problem-solving ability were honed under the pressure of volcanic winters and constant migration. One of the most significant evolutionary changes that occurred during this time was likely related to human brain development. The harsh conditions pushed early humans to develop better ways of communicating, socializing, and planning for survival. These pressures likely selected for individuals who were better at thinking critically, working in groups, and using tools to solve problems. The ability to cooperate in small groups was crucial during this time. Early humans learned to share resources, work together in new ways, and rely on each other for survival. This social cooperation was a key factor in their ability to survive and eventually thrive in the face of such adversity. As the climate cooled and the environment changed, early humans may have also experienced genetic changes that contributed to their survival. The volcanic winters would have created selective pressures on humans and other species, favoring those with genetic traits that allowed them to cope with the extreme conditions. For example, humans who were able to endure longer periods of cold or who could adapt their diets to the limited food sources available would have been more likely to survive. Over time, these traits would have become more common in the population, driving human evolution forward. The volcanic period also forced early humans to become more resourceful. The eruption of supervolcanoes created new challenges, but it also created new opportunities. Early humans learned to use volcanic materials like obsidian for tools, adapted to new environments, and found ways to make fire, which was crucial for cooking food, staying warm, and protecting themselves from predators. These innovations didn't just help humans survive, they marked the beginning of a new stage in human evolution, one driven by creativity and adaptability. The pressure of constant volcanic eruptions acted like a pressure cooker for human evolution. It forced early humans to adapt quickly to their changing environment, and those who were able to think creatively, work together, and innovate were the ones who survived. This time of intense volcanic activity didn't just change the environment, it changed the very course of human evolution. It gave rise to the traits that would define us as a species: intelligence, adaptability, and the ability to survive even the most extreme conditions. The volcanic period may have been a time of destruction, but it was also a time that set the stage for the rise of humanity. As volcanic activity ravaged the earth, human groups found themselves caught in a desperate struggle for survival. The eruptions and the cooling climate had disrupted food sources, and the world that had once been rich with resources was now a place where every meal and every drop of water was hard to come by. This battle for resources was unlike anything humans had faced before. It wasn't just about fighting predators or harsh weather. It was about fighting for access to the most basic necessities of life. Cooperation, conflict, and innovation became key in this survival race. The volcanic winters, which were triggered by the ash and gases that blocked out the sun, caused global temperatures to drop significantly. This sudden cooling threw ecosystems into disarray. The plants that early humans relied on for food were no longer able to grow as they had before. The animals they hunted were also disappearing or moving to new areas in search of food. The forests, grasslands, and rivers that had once been bountiful were now barren and covered in layers of ash. Early humans had to find new ways to survive in a world where food, shelter, and water were becoming increasingly scarce. As resources became harder to find, human groups began to compete for what remained. Areas that had once been home to multiple groups of people were now being fought over as different groups sought to claim them as their own. This competition for territory wasn't always violent, but it was intense. Groups had to establish dominance over certain areas to ensure their survival. Those who controlled the best hunting grounds, water sources, or fertile land had an advantage. The competition didn't just affect humans, it also impacted the animals and plants that shared the same environment. As resources dwindled, everything and everyone was forced to fight for survival. While conflict was inevitable, cooperation also played a vital role in survival. Human groups that worked together had a better chance of finding food, building shelters, and protecting themselves from threats. Cooperation allowed for the sharing of resources, such as food or water, and the pooling of knowledge about how to survive in this new world. The ability to work together, to share information, and to form alliances was essential in a time when no group could survive alone. This was a time when early humans had to rely on each other more than ever before. At the same time, innovation became crucial. Early humans had always been resourceful, but the challenges posed by the volcanic crisis pushed their creativity to new levels. They began to adapt their tools and techniques to the changing environment. Volcanic rock, which had once seemed like a hazard, was now being used to create sharper weapons and tools. The use of fire, which had already been a life-saving skill, became even more important. Fire was used not only to cook food and stay warm, but also to clear land, to protect against predators, and to preserve food for the harsh winters. Early humans also began to experiment with new food sources. Insects, roots, and other plants that had once been ignored were now valuable sources of nutrition. The battle for resources was a turning point in human history. It forced early humans to innovate, cooperate, and adapt in ways that had never been necessary before. The ability to work together and use their surroundings in creative ways helped human groups survive during the volcanic winter. The struggle for food, water, and shelter became the driving force behind human evolution, shaping the development of social structures, technologies, and survival strategies that would allow humans to endure even the toughest conditions. This battle for resources wasn't just a fight for survival, it was a fight that laid the foundation for the future of humanity. Fire, in the world of supervolcanoes, was both a blessing and a curse. It was a force of nature that could both destroy and create, and early humans had to learn how to use it to their advantage. During the constant volcanic eruptions, the Earth was often a landscape of raging fires as lava flows, lightning strikes, and burning forests created wildfires that would stretch for miles. But in the midst of this chaos, humans found a way to harness fire, turning it from a dangerous disaster into one of their greatest survival tools. At first, fire was just another natural force to be feared, like the lava flows and ash clouds. Early humans, like all creatures, had to contend with its destructive power. But over time, they learned that fire didn't just consume, it could also provide. The key was in learning how to control it. In a world filled with volcanic activity, where the environment was constantly changing and food sources were scarce, fire became a lifeline. It allowed humans to cook food, stay warm, and protect themselves from predators, all of which were crucial for survival in the harsh volcanic winters. In the early stages, humans likely learned to use fire in much the same way that other animals would have, by taking advantage of natural occurrences. A lightning strike, for example, might have sparked a fire in a dry forest, and early humans would have seen the benefits of using that fire for warmth or cooking. Once they realized fire's potential, they began to seek it out and use it more intentionally. The ability to control fire gave humans an advantage over many other species, allowing them to live in environments that would have been too cold or too dangerous without it. As volcanic eruptions rained down ash and debris, the need for fire became even more urgent. The earth was darkened by the ash clouds, and temperatures dropped, making it impossible for many animals and plants to survive. But humans, with their ability to control fire, found ways to stay warm. They built shelters and campfires that provided heat, helping them survive the bitter cold of the volcanic winters. The warmth from fire not only kept them comfortable, but also allowed them to cook food, making it more nutritious and easier to digest. The energy and calories from cooked food gave early humans a survival edge in a world where resources were limited. Fire also played a critical role in defense. In a landscape ravaged by volcanic eruptions, predators would have been desperate for food, and fire became a powerful deterrent. Early humans learned to use fire to protect their camps, keeping dangerous animals at bay. Fire was used to clear land, making it easier to hunt and gather food. It also provided light in the darkness, allowing humans to see and work in conditions that would have otherwise been impossible. As time went on, early humans became masters of fire. They learned how to start it, control it, and use it to transform their environment. They used fire not just for warmth or cooking, but to forge tools, harden weapons, and even clear paths through the dense volcanic forests. Fire became a symbol of human ingenuity, a tool that allowed humans to adapt to the harshest conditions on Earth. It wasn't just a reaction to the volcanic eruptions, it was a weapon and a resource that helped early humans thrive in a world that was constantly changing. The rise of fire marked the beginning of a new chapter in human evolution, one where humans didn't just survive the disasters of the Earth, but learned to use them to their advantage. When supervolcanoes erupted, the effects weren't just local, they spread across the planet, setting off a chain of events that would alter the Earth's climate for thousands of years. The volcanic ash, gases, and aerosols that were released into the atmosphere blocked out sunlight and caused the planet to cool rapidly. This sudden drop in temperature didn't just lead to temporary cooling, but triggered a series of global climate shifts that created ice ages, droughts, and unpredictable weather patterns. The volcanic activity that had ravaged the Earth didn't just change the environment in the moment. It set the stage for long-term climate changes that would shape life on Earth for millennia. The immediate effect of volcanic eruptions was a massive cooling of the Earth. Ash and sulfur dioxide were released into the atmosphere, and over time, they formed clouds that trapped sunlight, leading to a decrease in temperatures. This period, known as a volcanic winter, lasted for years and caused a significant drop in global temperatures. The cooling was severe enough to trigger ice ages, where glaciers expanded across the planet, covering vast areas of land in thick ice. These ice ages would reshape the Earth's landscape, carving out valleys and mountain ranges, and altering ecosystems in ways that are still visible today. The cooling of the Earth during this volcanic period was not a one-time event. It set off a series of climate shifts that would last for thousands of years. As the Earth struggled to recover from the volcanic eruptions, new climatic patterns began to emerge. The planet oscillated between periods of extreme cold, where glaciers advanced, and warmer intervals, where the ice retreated. This cycle of warming and cooling created a pattern of dramatic shifts in the Earth's climate, and it was during this time that ice ages came and went in relatively short cycles. The constant back and forth of ice and warmth created a world of unpredictability, where life had to constantly adapt to the changing conditions. While ice ages were sweeping across large portions of the Earth, Other regions experienced the opposite effect: severe droughts. The volcanic ash and gases not only blocked sunlight, but also altered global weather patterns. The cooling of the atmosphere affected rainfall, causing droughts in areas that had once been lush and fertile. Rivers dried up, forests withered, and once thriving ecosystems began to collapse. These droughts were another blow to early human populations, making it even harder to find food and water in a world already struggling to survive. For many species, including early humans, these dry periods were just as deadly as the ice ages. The Earth's climate was in a constant state of flux during this time, with unpredictable shifts between extreme cold and searing heat. In some places, the glaciers would advance, locking away water in massive ice sheets, while in others, the lack of rain would lead to desertification. These changes had profound impacts on ecosystems. Plant and animal species that were once suited to certain climates now found themselves struggling to survive as the Earth's temperatures and weather patterns shifted. Some species adapted, evolving to survive in the new conditions, while others simply couldn't keep up and went extinct. For early humans, these global climate shifts were a constant challenge. They had to adapt to rapidly changing environments, migrating from one region to another as ice ages and droughts came and went. The unpredictable weather forced humans to develop new survival strategies, using fire, tools, and cooperation to make it through. These climate shifts played a huge role in shaping human evolution, pushing early humans to become more resourceful, adaptable, and resilient. The volcanic period didn't just cool the Earth temporarily, it set in motion a pattern of climate instability that would last for thousands of years. Ice ages, droughts, and shifting weather patterns became a part of life, forcing species, including humans, to constantly adapt to a changing world. The ripple effects of the volcanic age reshaped the planet in ways that are still felt today. After what seemed like an endless stretch of time filled with volcanic eruptions, the Earth finally started to calm. The intense volcanic activity that had been shaping the planet for millions of years began to subside. The ash clouds that had blocked out the sun slowly dissipated, and the thick layers of volcanic debris that had covered the land started to settle. With the eruption cycles becoming less frequent, the Earth began to emerge from its volcanic nightmare. But the question was, what happened next? How did the planet recover after so many years of constant upheaval? How did ecosystems rebuild themselves from the destruction? The recovery process was slow and gradual. With the cooling Earth slowly warming up, the volcanic ash that had blanketed much of the planet's surface began to break down and enrich the soil with nutrients. What had once been barren and lifeless was now primed for new growth. Over time, the planet's ecosystems started to bounce back, and life found ways to re-establish itself. Plants that had been buried beneath layers of ash began to grow again, taking advantage of the rich volcanic soil that had formed. These new plants provided the foundation for the recovery of animal life as well. As the ash began to settle, the Earth's temperatures slowly stabilized. The intense cold of the volcanic winters began to ease, and the ice sheets that had covered large portions of the planet began to retreat. The planet warmed up, allowing ecosystems to rebuild. The long, unpredictable cycles of ice ages and warming periods started to stabilize, providing a more consistent climate for life to flourish. Slowly, forests, grasslands, and wetlands began to reappear, filling the once barren landscapes with life. The Earth was no longer a planet dominated by volcanic eruptions. It was becoming a place where new ecosystems could grow and thrive. With the Earth warming and the environment becoming more stable, animal populations began to recover as well. Species that had managed to survive the volcanic crisis started to expand, while new species began to emerge. The volcanic activity that had driven many animals into extinction had also opened up new ecological niches, and animals had the opportunity to evolve and adapt to these new environments. In the forests and grasslands that began to emerge, herbivores found new plant life to graze on, while carnivores began to find a fresh supply of prey. For early humans, this recovery period was a turning point. The constant threat of volcanic eruptions and the harsh conditions that had forced them to migrate were starting to fade. With more stable ecosystems and an abundance of resources, humans could settle in one place and begin to build more permanent communities. The pressure of survival during the volcanic crisis had driven human innovation and cooperation, but now, with the Earth recovering, humans began to develop new tools and technologies that would help them thrive in this more stable world. The end of the volcanic era didn't mean that life returned to the way it had been before the eruptions. The planet had been forever changed by millions of years of volcanic activity, but it did mark the beginning of a new chapter, one where ecosystems slowly healed, species adapted, and humans could finally begin to build the foundations of civilization. The recovery was a slow process, but the Earth had shown its incredible resilience. Even after such a long period of volcanic destruction, the planet proved that life could find a way to rebuild and recover. It was a reminder that, no matter how harsh the world may become, life has an uncanny ability to adapt and emerge stronger from adversity. After millions of years of volcanic chaos, something incredible started to happen. Despite the destruction and the long, lasting effects of supervolcano eruptions, life began to bounce back. The ecosystems that had been wiped out by ash, lava flows, and extreme climate changes were slowly being replaced by new ones. But this time, the Earth wasn't just recovering to what it once was. It was evolving into something new. The volcanic activity had completely reshaped the planet, and in the aftermath, new forms of life began to emerge to fill the gaps left by the old ones. The volcanic activity that had ravaged the Earth didn't just cause extinction, it also created new opportunities for life to thrive. With the disruption of established ecosystems, many ecological niches were left empty. Some of these niches were filled by the survivors of the volcanic crisis, but others were taken over by entirely new species that evolved to take advantage of the altered environment. The Earth had been fundamentally changed, and as it slowly recovered, life adapted to fill the new world that had emerged. One of the most striking examples of this process was how new plant species began to evolve. The volcanic ash that had once been so destructive began to break down, creating rich, fertile soil. This fertile ground allowed for new plant species to take root and grow in places where there had once been barren wastelands. These plants were different from those that had existed before the volcanic eruptions. They were adapted to the new, sometimes harsher environment, able to survive the occasional droughts or cooler temperatures that still lingered in some regions. These plants formed the foundation for the new ecosystems that were developing, providing food and shelter for animals, and creating the balance of life once again. As plants adapted and evolved, animals followed suit. The survivors of the volcanic crisis had made it through because they were able to adjust to the changing conditions. As the environment continued to evolve, new species of animals began to emerge. Some were directly descended from the survivors, while others were completely new, evolving to fill niches that had never existed before. For example, some animals that had once relied on plants for food began to adapt to a diet of new, hardier plants that could survive in the volcanic soil. Other animals learned to adapt to the changing climate, evolving traits that helped them survive the cooler or drier conditions. This new wave of evolution wasn't just about survival, it was about innovation. Animals developed new ways of hunting, migrating, and communicating to adapt to the changing environment. Some species that had once relied on certain types of prey found new ways to hunt or shifted their diets to take advantage of new food sources. In the same way, predators adapted to these changes, developing sharper senses or new strategies to catch their prey. For early humans, this period of recovery was a time of great opportunity. As ecosystems recovered and new species emerged, humans had more resources to take advantage of. The innovations that came out of the volcanic crisis, such as the use of fire, new tools, and social cooperation, were essential to surviving in this new world. But as the Earth healed and new life forms evolved, humans found themselves in a world that was not just different, but richer and more diverse. It was a time when humans learned to coexist with new species and ecosystems, adapting to the ever-changing environment that had been shaped by volcanic forces. The resilience of life during this period is a testament to nature's ability to bounce back, even from the most devastating disasters. The Earth, after millions of years of volcanic activity, was alive with new possibilities. As species adapted and evolved to fit the new world, the planet entered a new phase of life, one that would lay the foundation for the future of all living things. The survivors of the volcanic epoch left behind a legacy that would shape the course of human history for thousands of years. Early humans, who managed to endure the constant volcanic eruptions and the harsh environment that followed, didn't just survive. They adapted, innovated, and laid the foundation for everything that came after. The survival traits that were developed during this time became embedded in the human species, passed down through generations, and helped create the modern civilizations we know today. For early humans, survival during the volcanic era was a matter of constant adaptation. The volcanic winters and shifting climates tested their resilience, forcing them to think creatively and work together in ways that would shape their social structures for millennia. It was during this time that early humans developed crucial survival strategies: the use of fire for warmth and cooking, the creation of tools from volcanic rocks, and the ability to cooperate in small groups. These abilities were not only essential for surviving the volcanic crisis, but also for building the foundation of human civilization. The need for cooperation became especially important. During the volcanic winters, resources became scarce, and human groups had to learn how to share what little they had. This early form of social cooperation became a key trait of humanity, helping early humans survive in an unforgiving world. The bonds formed in these difficult times laid the groundwork for the complex social structures that would later define human societies. People who worked together, shared resources, and looked out for one another were the ones most likely to survive, and these behaviors became ingrained in human nature. Innovation was another trait that flourished during this time. Early humans learned to use volcanic resources, like obsidian, for tools and weapons. They adapted to new environments, developed strategies for finding food and water, and learned to use fire in increasingly sophisticated ways. These innovations weren't just about surviving the volcanic winters, they were the building blocks for the future. The ability to adapt, to invent new solutions to old problems, would be a defining characteristic of humans as they moved from one crisis to the next. The volcanic epoch also taught early humans how to be resourceful. When ecosystems collapsed and food became scarce, they found new sources of nutrition. They hunted different animals, gathered new plants, and even began to rely on insects for food. These survival tactics, born out of necessity, helped early humans develop a relationship with their environment that allowed them to thrive even in the harshest conditions. This resourcefulness would continue to serve humanity as they faced new challenges throughout history. The traits that helped early humans survive the volcanic era, cooperation, innovation, adaptability, and resourcefulness, became the foundation for modern human societies. As the Earth recovered and human populations began to grow, these traits allowed early humans to spread out, build communities, and eventually form civilizations. The survival strategies developed during the volcanic epoch didn't just help humans survive, they helped them thrive in a world that had once seemed determined to destroy them. The human legacy of the volcanic era is a testament to the resilience of the species. Early humans who survived the volcanic winters and shifting climates laid the groundwork for the civilizations that would rise in the centuries to come. They passed down the lessons of survival, cooperation, and innovation to future generations, ensuring that humanity would continue to adapt and thrive, no matter what challenges lay ahead. The volcanic era may have been a time of destruction, but it was also a time of transformation, a time when the survival traits that would define human history were forged in the fires of adversity. The eruptions of supervolcanoes, while incredibly destructive in the moment, have left behind a geological legacy that continues to shape the Earth's terrain and influence life on the planet today. The fire and fury of volcanic activity didn't just alter the environment temporarily, it changed the very structure of the Earth. From towering mountain ranges to fertile valleys, the landscape we see today has been profoundly shaped by the volcanic activity that occurred millions of years ago. These lasting impacts are a testament to the power of volcanoes and their role in the Earth's ongoing transformation. When a supervolcano erupts, the sheer force of the explosion sends massive amounts of lava, ash, and gases into the atmosphere. Over time, these eruptions leave behind immense craters, or calderas, which are some of the most striking features on Earth's surface. These craters mark the spots where supervolcanoes once erupted, and they often become fertile areas for new life. The ash and volcanic debris that settle after an eruption enrich the soil, creating lush, fertile land. It's in these valleys and plains, formed by volcanic activity, that new ecosystems take root and thrive. The eruptions may have wiped out entire ecosystems at the time, but they also laid the groundwork for the development of new ones, rich with plant and animal life. Volcanoes also played a major role in the formation of mountain ranges. When tectonic plates shift and volcanoes erupt, the Earth's crust is forced upward, creating towering mountains. Over millions of years, these volcanic mountains have weathered and eroded, becoming some of the most recognizable features of the landscape. The Cascade Range in the Pacific Northwest of North America, the Andes in South America, and the Himalayas in Asia are just a few examples of mountain ranges that were shaped by volcanic activity. These mountains, formed by volcanic processes, continue to influence weather patterns, create diverse habitats, and provide resources for both humans and wildlife. Beyond mountains, volcanoes also created vast networks of underground reservoirs and mineral deposits. The volcanic ash and lava flows that settled into the Earth's crust often contained valuable minerals. Over time, these minerals became concentrated in specific areas, making volcanic regions rich in resources like gold, silver, copper, and other essential metals. These resources continue to play a key role in human industry and technology today. The fertile soils created by volcanic ash have also made volcanic regions ideal for agriculture. Crops like grapes, olives, and coffee thrive in these rich soils, and volcanic areas around the world are known for their agriculture, even in the present day. The effects of volcanic activity have also created distinctive geological features, such as geothermal hot springs, geysers, and volcanic islands. These features, formed by the heat and pressure from beneath the Earth's surface, provide unique habitats for specialized plant and animal species. They also offer natural resources like geothermal energy, which humans have learned to harness for power. The lasting legacy of volcanic activity is not just in the landforms it created, but in the ecosystems that evolved around them. Volcanoes have left an indelible mark on the Earth's surface, shaping the terrain and influencing the flow of water, the growth of forests, and the development of diverse habitats. The fire that once brought destruction has now become a force of creation, a reminder of the dynamic, ever-changing nature of the planet. The mountains, valleys, and fertile lands we see today are a testament to the power of supervolcanoes, and their impact continues to shape life on Earth in ways we are still discovering. When we think about the volcanic eruptions that reshaped the Earth millions of years ago, it's easy to imagine them as ancient events, something that only affected the planet in the distant past. However, these catastrophic eruptions left behind more than just physical scars on the Earth. They left a genetic legacy that continues to echo through the DNA of every human alive today. The ancestors who survived such a harsh, volcanic world passed down more than just stories and tools. They passed down traits that helped them survive the devastation. Traits that still influence who we are as a species. In the aftermath of the volcanic crisis, the humans who survived faced extreme challenges. The climate had changed drastically, food was scarce, and the very air was poisoned by volcanic ash and gases. Only those who could adapt quickly to the new, harsh environment had a chance of survival. These survivors passed on their genes to future generations, but it wasn't just random luck that allowed them to survive. It was their ability to cope with extreme stress, change, and adversity. The traits that helped them endure the volcanic winters were the very traits that were passed down through the generations. One of the most significant genetic changes that may have occurred during this time was related to human adaptability. The ability to survive in such a volatile environment required flexibility, both physically and mentally. Humans who were better at adapting to fluctuating temperatures, finding food in a changing environment, and working together in groups were the ones who lived to reproduce. Over time, these adaptive traits became more common in the population. Today, humans are known for their remarkable ability to adjust to new and challenging environments, a trait that likely traces back to the survival skills developed during the volcanic period. The volcanic crisis also put a tremendous strain on the human immune system. With diseases and infections spreading in the wake of such environmental upheaval, the ability to resist illness became a key factor in survival. The genetic mutations that helped early humans survive during these harsh conditions were likely passed down, leading to the immune system traits that are present in modern humans. These traits helped humans build stronger defenses against diseases that could have wiped out entire populations. Interestingly, modern humans are still more susceptible to certain diseases than other animals, a legacy of the genetic bottleneck that occurred during this time. Some scientists believe that certain genetic disorders that are now common in humans might be the result of the genetic struggles our ancestors faced during the volcanic crisis. These disorders were possibly carried through the generations because they may have provided an advantage in the specific environmental conditions of the volcanic period. Another key trait that may have been passed down from this period is social cooperation. The volcanic winter forced humans to work together in ways that were crucial for survival. Groups that shared resources, helped each other find food, and protected one another from dangers were the most likely to survive. This deep, deep-seated need for cooperation became embedded in human DNA, and it continues to influence our social behaviors today. Humans are naturally social creatures, and our ability to form complex societies, share knowledge, and cooperate on a global scale may have its roots in the volcanic era. The genetic legacy of the volcanic epoch isn't something that we can see directly, but it's still there in the way we adapt to our environment, our immune responses, and our social structures. The survivors of those early volcanic winters passed down the traits that allowed humanity to thrive in a world of constant change. These traits, honed through millions of years of survival, are still present in every one of us. The echoes of that volcanic era, buried deep in our genes, continue to shape who we are today, a reminder of the resilience and adaptability that define us as a species. When we look back at the massive supervolcanic eruptions that shaped the Earth's history, it's impossible not to wonder, could it happen again? The answer is yes. The planet is still alive with volcanic activity, and while the chances of another catastrophic supervolcano eruption happening soon are low, the possibility remains. Volcanic activity is an ongoing part of Earth's natural processes, and the potential for another massive eruption could have serious consequences for our climate, ecosystems, and society. But how might today's world handle such an event? Could we survive a new volcanic age? Earth's volcanic activity is far from over. In fact, there are several supervolcanoes around the world today, with the most well-known being Yellowstone in the United States, the Toba caldera in Indonesia, and Lake Taupo in New Zealand. These volcanic hotspots are constantly monitored by scientists who study their activity closely. While there's no immediate sign that any of these volcanoes are about to erupt, they serve as a reminder that the Earth's fiery past is not completely behind us. These supervolcanoes are capable of catastrophic eruptions, and when they do erupt, they have the potential to affect the entire planet. When supervolcanoes erupt, they release vast amounts of ash, gases, and sulfur dioxide into the atmosphere, which can block sunlight and drastically cool the Earth's surface. This could trigger another volcanic winter, causing temperatures to drop and disrupting weather patterns around the world. Just like during the ancient volcanic events, such cooling could lead to crop failures, food shortages, and widespread ecological collapse. The effects would be felt across the globe, and life would once again be forced to adapt to new, harsh conditions. So how might today's society respond to a new volcanic crisis? One of the biggest differences between the past and now is that we have technology and infrastructure that didn't exist during earlier volcanic eruptions. In theory, we would have better access to early warning systems, allowing us to track volcanic activity and evacuate populations in danger. Scientists use satellites, seismic data, and ground-based sensors to monitor supervolcanoes and detect signs of impending eruptions. This would give governments and organizations more time to prepare and potentially save lives. However, the scale of a supervolcano eruption would still be so immense that it's difficult to fully prepare for its global consequences. Today's society is also more connected than ever. This could be both a blessing and a curse in the event of a volcanic eruption. On one hand, modern transportation, communication, and global trade networks could allow for faster distribution of resources like food and medical supplies to affected areas. On the other hand, a global disruption of the climate and food supply could lead to widespread panic, economic collapse, and social instability. Just as early humans learned to cooperate during volcanic winters, modern societies would need to find ways to work together to survive. Another key difference today is our knowledge of climate change. The cooling effects of a supervolcano eruption could be exacerbated by the already changing climate. The additional stress on agriculture, water resources, and biodiversity could push ecosystems past the point of recovery. While early humans had to adapt to volcanic winters without understanding the science behind them, we now have a better grasp of how global climate systems work. Still, that knowledge may not be enough to prevent a complete breakdown of our food systems, especially if the eruption lasts for years or longer. The next great volcanic eruption is not a certainty, but it remains a possibility. Earth's volcanic past has shown us just how powerful and disruptive these events can be. While we may be better prepared than our ancient ancestors, the scale of such an event would still pose a serious challenge. How we adapt, cooperate, and innovate in response to future volcanic disasters will determine how well we fare. Just like early humans, we'll have to rely on our resilience and creativity to survive, but this time the stakes are even higher. The question is not if another supervolcano will erupt, but how we will face it when it does. In the face of unimaginable destruction, when the Earth was torn apart by supervolcanoes and the skies were darkened by endless ash, life found a way. The volcanic eruptions that reshaped the planet millions of years ago seemed like an insurmountable obstacle, a force capable of wiping out everything in its path. And yet, life survived. Against all odds, plants, animals, and eventually humans adapted, persevered, and thrived. The survival of humanity in the natural world after such a catastrophic event is a powerful reminder of life's incredible resilience. The aftermath of volcanic eruptions left the Earth in chaos. Ecosystems were destroyed, climates shifted, and food became scarce. For many species, the volcanic winters and cooling temperatures were too much to bear, and entire populations vanished. Yet, some species managed to hold on. They found new niches in a world that had been completely altered. The very landscapes that had once been destroyed by lava flows and ash became the foundations for new life. The rich, volcanic soil that resulted from these eruptions helped new plants to grow. These plants provided food for herbivores, which in turn supported carnivores. Life found a way to regenerate, adapt, and re-establish itself. For early humans, the volcanic period was one of the toughest tests of survival, but it was also a time that shaped humanity's greatest strengths: the ability to adapt quickly, to work together in groups, and to use resources in innovative ways became the foundation for human survival. Humans learned how to make fire, build tools, and create new ways of finding food. They learned to cooperate and share resources in a way that allowed them to make it through even the harshest conditions. These traits of adaptability, resourcefulness, and cooperation are still present in modern humans today. We inherited these survival skills from our ancestors, who lived through a volcanic crisis and came out stronger on the other side. The survival of life on Earth, despite the catastrophic events of the volcanic epoch, speaks to the extraordinary resilience of nature. It shows how life, in all its forms, is capable of adjusting to extreme changes and finding new ways to survive. Plants, animals, and humans didn't just endure, they evolved. They adapted to a world that was constantly changing, and over time they rebuilt ecosystems, formed new habitats, and created the conditions for life to flourish once again. Today, we see this resilience of life in action. Despite the many challenges we face, climate change, natural disasters, and global crises, life continues to adapt and persist. Just as life recovered after volcanic winters, so too can we recover from the challenges we face today. The lessons learned from the past show us that no matter how destructive an event may seem, life always finds a way to adapt. The resilience of life is a testament to the power of evolution, the strength of species to endure, and the incredible capacity of the natural world to regenerate. The Earth has seen countless catastrophic events over its long history, but each time, life has come back, stronger and more diverse. It is this resilience that has allowed us to build civilizations, explore the planet, and even reach into space. It's a reminder that no matter how difficult the circumstances, life will always find a way to continue. This resilience is not just a survival mechanism. It is a force that drives all life forward, proving that in the face of even the most insurmountable odds, life can adapt, overcome, and thrive.